I've been a tailor my entire adult life. 42 years of hemming, stitching, fitting, and altering in the same little corner shop off Maple Street. I've dressed judges, undertakers, politicians, veterans, and even a few gangsters back in the day. People trusted me with their most personal garments, wedding tuxedos, funeral suits, military uniforms handed down through generations. But the most important suit I ever made was for a man who didn't even exist on paper. It all started the day after my 70th birthday. I had closed up early, poured myself a shot of rye whiskey, the kind I keep in the drawer behind the measuring tape, and sat on my old stool just watching the sunset filter through the dusty blinds. I was thinking about retiring. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, and business had slowed. People don't wear suits like they used to. Not when everyone's running around in hoodies and jeans. I figured I'd finally hang up the shears, maybe sell the place to someone young. That's when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up and saw a man. Mid-40s, tall, neat, almost unsettlingly still. He had silver at his temples, a clean-shaven face, and a voice as smooth as pressed silk. "You still take custom work?" he asked, eyes scanning the room like he already knew the answer. I nodded. "Depends what kind of work." He placed a crisp envelope on the counter. "This is for a very special suit. Everything you need is in there. Measurements, fabric, even the style. I need it finished in 2 weeks. No sooner, no later." 2 weeks. That was nothing new. But something about how he said it, the precision, felt like a man used to giving orders. Not in a rude way, just absolute. Like every word had been measured before it left his mouth. I opened the envelope. Inside was a photo of a navy blue 3-piece, the kind you'd see in the 1950s. Wide lapels, deep pleats, cuffed trousers, hand-stitched buttonholes. Alongside it were exact measurements and a down payment in cash, more than I'd made in the past 2 months combined. "No name?" I asked. He smiled, just barely. "It's not for me. But don't worry. You'll understand soon enough." Then he walked out. No business card, no handshake, no number to call. Just the envelope and the echo of that bell. I should have known then. When a man pays in cash for a suit he won't wear, something strange is being sewn. After the stranger left, I stood behind the counter staring at that envelope for a long while. I've tailored thousands of garments in my lifetime, but this one, it gave me a chill. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more like the feeling you get when you find an old photo of someone you forgot you missed. Still, work is work, and the money was real. The measurements were so exact. It was like they had been taken by machine. Height, chest, inseam, down to the 1/8 of an inch. I'd never seen anyone so precisely documented. It wasn't just thorough. It was intimate. Like whoever wrote those numbers knew the body better than the man himself. Then there was the fabric. He'd specified a wool cashmere blend, navy with a hint of charcoal undertone. Something that looked ordinary in shadow, but shimmered with depth under direct light. And of course, it wasn't something I had lying around. But when I called my old supplier, they told me a roll had already been ordered and paid for, under my name, arriving tomorrow. That unsettled me. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just a stranger. He was a planner. He knew my habits, my vendors, and even my tendency to never say no to a curious job with cash on the table. The next morning, the fabric arrived. It was exactly as described, smooth as sin, heavier than it looked, and already pre-washed to avoid shrinkage. I touched it and felt, not coldness, but weight, like it carried memory. I got to work. For days, I sewed in silence. Each stitch, I double-checked. Every seam, I pressed with more care than usual. My hands, old and calloused, moved with a precision I hadn't felt in years. It was the vest that got to me. When I turned the back lining inside out, a small patch of handwriting had been stitched in. Barely visible, pale thread on pale fabric, not printed, hand sewn. This is where it ends. I leaned back in my chair and stared at it. It wasn't part of the original design. I hadn't sewn it. It was already there. And then the bell above the door rang again. Same man, same coat, same calm face. "Halfway done?" he asked like he'd timed it. I nodded. "Did you sew this?" I asked, showing him the message. He looked at it, then at me. "That part wasn't for you." Then he turned and left. After he left, I sat for a while with the vest in my lap, running my thumb over the nearly invisible message. This is where it ends. It wasn't just the oddness of it. It was the way he looked at me when I asked. Like he wasn't surprised I found it, just disappointed I asked. I checked the rest of the fabric, carefully, every fold, every corner. That's when I found a second message, this time tucked into the inner lining of the suit jacket. The same fine thread, the same deliberate hand. He wore it once, then he disappeared. It felt like I was building a story I wasn't meant to understand. By now, I had questions, a lot of them, but none that I could ask anyone. The man didn't leave a name, didn't take a receipt, and only spoke in sentences that sounded like they belonged in a eulogy. I thought about quitting, about leaving the suit half-finished and calling it a wash. But I couldn't, not because of the money, but because something about this project felt necessary. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the photograph he'd left in the envelope, the one showing the completed version of the suit I was making. There was no face, just the body from the neck down, wearing the exact style, same lapels, same cuff. Only now I noticed the background. A brick wall with an old mural, faded but still legible. It read, "May justice find the forgotten." I knew that wall. It was downtown, behind the old train depot. The next morning I drove out there. The mural was still there, more faded than in the photo. And there, scrawled in the bottom right corner in fresh red paint, clearly newer than the rest, was a date. Just a week from now. I stood there for a long time, heart ticking in my chest like a metronome. Whatever this man was planning, it was going to happen soon. And I was making the uniform for it. After visiting the mural, I couldn't bring myself to keep working, not yet. I needed answers. The messages stitched inside the suit, the date, the train depot. It was all too precise, too curated. That evening, I dug through an old box in my back room. The kind of box you pretend doesn't exist until something stirs you to open it. Inside were fabric swatches, appointment logs, old receipts, and something I hadn't touched in over 20 years, my client archive. Back when I first opened the shop, I used to keep handwritten records of each commission. Name, measurements, alterations, even small notes like prefers extra room in the shoulder or limps on left leg. It was dusty work. But eventually, I found something. A name. David K. Waller. Custom three-piece suit, navy wool cashmere blend, same measurements, same cut. And the kicker? Completed October 12th, 1989. Final fitting, never collected. Notes. Client vanished. Police inquiry followed. My fingers trembled. I remembered that now. The man who never came back. The police stopped by, asked a few questions. They said he was being investigated for financial fraud, that he'd run off. But I remembered thinking how odd it was. He'd prepaid in full, even tipped extra. I stared at the signature. It wasn't the name from the envelope. It wasn't the man who'd come into my shop. But the measurements, they were exactly the same. I went back to the sweat in progress. I turned it inside out, checking seams I hadn't sewn yet. On the inside of the pant hem, written in the same fine stitching, was a third message. He never ran. He was buried. Something twisted in my gut. This wasn't just a custom job. This was a message in clothing form, a riddle woven into wool. And I was the only one being allowed to read it. But why me? I couldn't stop thinking about that final line. He never ran. He was buried. It haunted me the rest of the night. I barely slept. And when I did, I dreamed of sewing suits for men without faces, each one whispering messages through the lining. By morning, I had made a decision. I returned to the client logs, scanning for anything related to David K. Waller. But it was the police visit that stood out the most. The officer who came by left a card. I still had it taped inside the old drawer. Officer Glenn Rourke, retired now, I assumed. But with a little internet digging, I found him, living just an hour away. I called. He didn't sound surprised to hear from me. In fact, he sounded like he'd been waiting. "You still at the shop?" he asked. "I am." "You ever finish that suit?" Number not back then." A long pause. "Maybe now's the time," he said, and then hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. He hadn't asked who I was, hadn't asked what I was calling about. He knew. That afternoon, I returned to the suit. It was nearly done now. I'd never worked so carefully, so consciously. Every pocket, every lining, every thread held a weight, like I was building a confession that couldn't be spoken aloud. I opened the jacket and noticed a faint shimmer just inside the chest pocket. It wasn't a thread. It was a tiny film negative, sewn into the lining, barely the size of a postage stamp. I carefully cut it loose and held it up to the light. There he was, David Waller, or at least the man who commissioned the suit, standing next to a large safe deposit box. The timestamp read, October 11th, 1989, 11:52 p.m. He looked scared. His eyes were off camera like someone else had taken the picture, or was standing over him, and scrawled on the back, in familiar handwriting, "This is what he died for. Don't let them bury it again." Whatever this suit was for, it wasn't about fashion. It was evidence, and it was almost ready. I hadn't heard the front door open. I was in the back, brushing the jacket one last time, when I heard the familiar shuffle of footsteps on the creaky hardwood floor. That slow, deliberate cadence. He was back. I stepped into the showroom, and there he stood. Same dark coat, same sun-worn face. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him was a younger man, maybe mid-30s. Clean-cut, tense posture, eyes scanning the room like he was assessing a threat. The older man offered a polite nod. "It's ready?" I glanced at the jacket draped over my arm. Almost. Just one final adjustment. I caught the younger man eyeing me carefully, his hand never straying far from his coat pocket. "Who's your friend?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Let's just say, he's here to make sure I'm not interrupted." I understood. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't exactly legal. The older man took the jacket gently, running his fingers along the inside lapel. When he reached the chest pocket, the one that had held the film negative, he paused. A flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. "You found it," he said. I did. "And the others?" I nodded. He looked at me then, fully, with something bordering on respect. "Thank you." Before I could ask the 100 questions tumbling through my mind, the younger man cleared his throat. "It's time." The older man shrugged off his coat and slipped into the suit. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for him all these years. He walked to the mirror, adjusted the collar, ran his hand down the lapel, then looked at me one last time. I was a coward, he said softly. I let a good man die to protect my name. This is how I undo that. And with that, they were gone. I stood there for what felt like an hour, staring at the door. My shop, my quiet, tidy little shop, had become the stage for something I still didn't fully understand. But it wasn't over. Not yet. That night, I locked the shop early. I didn't sew. I didn't clean. I just sat with a cup of cold tea and stared at the phone, half hoping it wouldn't ring, half hoping it would. It did. Around 9:30 p.m., I answered on the second ring. "Mr. Delaney?" the voice asked. Older, female. Gravelly, but with grace behind it. The kind of voice worn thin by decades of truth being buried. "Yes." "You don't know me, but you made a suit once. For a man named David Waller, I went rigid." "I remember. My name is Claire Waller. David was my husband." I couldn't speak. "He didn't run," she continued. "He was murdered, left in a drainage tunnel near the Ashfield train yard, October 13th, 1989. They said he was missing. They lied. I buried an empty casket." I closed my eyes. I always believed someone would finish what he started. He said, if anything happened to him, there'd be a trail, hidden in the last thing he trusted. And he always trusted you, Mr. Delaney. He said you were the only man who ever made him feel truly seen. I had no words. Claire went on. "This morning, a package was left on my doorstep. Inside was the suit, folded perfectly, and in the breast pocket, that photograph, the one I thought was destroyed." My heart thudded in my chest. "Who brought it to you?" I asked. She paused. "No one. But I think it was meant for the world now. It's in the hands of a journalist already. Someone who won't let it die this time. Then, thank you. For being part of this. You didn't just sew a suit. You helped sew justice." She hung up. I sat alone in my little shop, surrounded by cloth and silence. And for the first time in decades, I felt lighter. Like maybe I had unstitched a lie that had been sewn too tightly into the fabric of time. A week passed. The story of David Waller hit the news like a thunderclap. Decades-old corruption, suppressed evidence, a murder covered up as disappearance. Photos surfaced, testimonies emerged. And though names were never officially released, I recognized one of the faces in the blurry courtroom sketch. The younger man, the one who'd stood in my shop, hand near his coat pocket. Turns out, he wasn't there to enforce silence. He was there to protect a witness. A living witness. The older man in the suit? He had been the partner, David's business associate, complicit at first, then terrified, then quiet for too long, until he couldn't be quiet anymore. And his way of making amends? A tailor shop, a suit lined with confessions, a trail of stitches leading back to the truth. Business slowed after the news broke. People didn't want to get suits made by the tailor in that article. Not yet, anyway. I didn't mind. I took comfort in silence. Until one morning, I came into the shop and found a small, unmarked envelope on my workbench. Just like before. No stamp, no handwriting, just a card inside with a single line. One last stitch for one last soul. Tucked beneath it was a photo. This time, not a victim. A girl, no older than 10, standing next to a man in uniform, smiling. Behind them, a shop window. My shop, from long ago. I turned the photo over. For my daughter. She deserves to know her father didn't disappear. No name, no return address, just trust and a request. So I set to work. One more suit, one more truth to be told in threads and seams. Not in courtrooms or headlines, but in the quiet, dignified way I've always known. Because sometimes justice isn't loud, it's tailored. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed the story, give it a like and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.